For more on the government shutdown, I spoke to Bruce Oppenheimer, a professor of political science at Vanderbilt University. Oppenheimer says Republicans in Congress are engaging what he calls policy extortion. He says shutting down the government in an attempt to undermine Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act is unprecedented. I asked him to explain what he means by policy extortion.
Policy extortion in that they're trying to get something or creating what they think is a bargaining situation. But there's really no bargain here because they're attaching to what is essentially must-pass legislation in the form of a continuing resolution to keep government spending going, really an extraneous policy demand. And they're really effectively holding that continuing resolution for ransom as a means of trying to get the extraneous policy demand in delaying the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, however you wish to label it. So it's in some sense it's different from the last time we had a shutdown in 1995-96, where at least at that point the policy demand had to do with budgetary matters, how quickly you were going to move to a balanced budget. This is really extraneous to whether you pass a continuing resolution or not.
I spoke yesterday to a former leader in the House on the Democratic side, Martin Frost from Texas, and he said this was a law passed by both houses of Congress, signed by the President of the United States, challenged, brought before the Supreme Court. They ruled it was a law. And he said for the Republicans to hold this hostage, it's not a sign of democracy. He calls it anarchy. Is that a safe way to describe it?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it anarchy, but it's really taking the nature of conflict in a different direction. And part of the problem that exists is if the Obama administration or the Democrats in the Senate were to agree to some sort of deal, it would set a very bad precedent. And the precedent would be that, in 4 or 5 years, maybe then when there's a Republican president and the Democrats want to hold up a continuing resolution or a debt ceiling extension, they could say, well, we're not going to do that unless you enact some change in gun control laws or some change in immigration. Something, again, this hostage holding would become legitimized. And so part of the problem is, from a governmental standpoint, is not just this particular exercise, but if you give this exercise any legitimacy, then the next time somebody wants to do it, they can say, well, we did it in 2013 and nobody stopped it then.
So do you see an end in sight?
Well, I think it's getting there somewhat slowly, but I think you will see an end in sight as the inconveniences from the shutdown start to increase in magnitude. And there's some things, for example, federal courts evidently have the ability to hold out about 2 weeks and pay people. If you're, for example, waiting on to close on a federally financed loan, for example, maybe that closing date is 2 weeks off. It's not today or tomorrow. But at some point, the federal government failing to process that will have repercussions. Maybe if you're the mom and pop sandwich shop across from a federal building who depends on federal employees buying food at that shop, it doesn't affect you for a couple of days, but if it goes on a couple of weeks, it has greater effects. So all of these things start to build, and things which were not, where it looks like a skeleton crew can do things for a few days, they may not be able to do it for a few weeks. After all, and the additional thing is you have 800,000 people who are now technically unemployed without benefits. Well, for a couple of days, that's not a problem. But if it goes on a couple of weeks, well, their spending may be seriously curtailed. So it becomes a real hit to the economy. So I think that starts to build, and it builds in the districts, not just of Democrats who want the continuing resolution, but of some of the Republicans now who have been voting for their version of a continuing resolution with the delay in funding of the Affordable Care Act as a rider on it.